Shabbat Shalom. As a kid, I would get deja vu all of the time. Like all the time. Like I would meet someone or something would happen, or I'd have a conversation and I could have sworn that it already happened. It was uncanny. As I got older, the deja vu became less and less. And as an adult, it almost never happens. Almost never, but not never. Because I could have sworn to you that just 6 weeks ago, a month and a half, I was standing up here and I was saying how the artist formerly known as Kanye West tweeted death threats at Jews. I'm sorry, weren't we just here? Mid-October 2022, a simpler time. The artist now known as Ye tweeted to his 31.4 million followers that he wanted to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people just 6 weeks ago. And yesterday, he tweeted a swastika interposed with the Star of David. After announcing, I see good things about Hitler, I love Hitler, I also love Nazis, on Alex Jones's podcast. What? The man who brought you DEFCON 3 to Jews loves Hitler? Tweets swastikas? Color me shocked. Now, that little stunt earned him a now rare temporary suspension from Twitter for incitement to violence. Deja vu? Right, yes, agreed. But is anyone else getting a little deja vu from this whole thing? No, just me? Didn't think so. Less than 2 months ago, I stood up here and I talked about the power of words. Because God spoke the world into being, as we know. God said, let there be light, let there be animals, let there be plants, and there was. Words have the power to create, which also means that words have the power to destroy. And when someone's words incite violence, that person loses the right to say whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want. You cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. Kanye West is mentally ill, and he needs help. And the violence that his words will cause cannot be understated, even with those considerations. I said then, and I stand by these words now, people can feel bad for his family. They should feel bad for his children, even for him, while taking proactive steps to protect and defend against him. A difference between 6 weeks ago and now, though, is DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has issued, just this week, a domestic terror threat warning bulletin to LGBTQ, migrant, and Jewish communities. Our national security experts say there is a persistent lethal threat coming from Americans against certain groups, LGBTQ, migrant, and Jewish. Specifically, the bulletin mentions an enduring threat to the Jewish community. And of note, there has been a 34% increase in anti-Jewish hate incidents since 2020. They are at their highest since the ADL started tracking in the 70s. There's no doubt about it. It is a scary time to be Jewish. And I've been seeing more and more these days calls for conversations within the Jewish community, Jewish organizations putting out the call to Jews for what we can do to combat anti-Semitism. And you know I always strive to be honest with you. When I get these emails, when I hear these calls go out, us saying to each other, what can we do to combat anti-Semitism? My first reaction, my very first internal reaction is, excuse me? What can I do? I'm not the problem here. We are not the problem here. We're not the anti-Semites. Anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, is by definition a non-Jewish problem. In what kind of world is the onus on the minority to convince the majority of their basic humanity, the worth of our very lives? It's like saying that anti-black racism is a problem for black people to solve. No, it's not. That anti-LGBTQ hatred is a problem for LGBT folks to solve. No, it is not. Hatred and violence against any minority community is a problem for those committing the hatred and violence against them to solve. We, don't get to just look on and go, oh, those poor people, that hatred and violence being done to them is awful, and keep walking. No, because then nothing will ever change. But it does feel rather helpless, just sitting here waiting for the majority to decide that we are after people after all. So in that sense, I guess I too ask the question, what can we do? There's a funny grammatical quirk in the part of the Torah we read this week. Jacob is on the run for his life. He's scared. He's in the desert. He's by himself. And eventually, it's the middle of the night. He's got to sleep. So he decides to make camp. Veikach me'avnei hamakom, and he took the stones of that place, put them under his head, and lay down. He has his famous dream with the ladder and the angels going up and down, yeah? And all of a sudden, during this dream, God is standing next to him and reminds him that he comes from a long line of incredible Jews and that his descendants, the Jewish people, the Jewish community, will be many, a community that even the non-Jewish nations will feel blessed to be with. Hinei anochi mach, remember I am with you, God says. I will protect you wherever you go, and I will never leave you. In the morning, Jacob is so heartened by this vision that he decides to make an altar to God on the spot. The Torah tells of Veikach et ha'eden, and he took the stone that was under his head to do so. Well, hold on a second, because the text literally just told us that Jacob took avnei hamakom, the stones of the place, but now magically there's ha'eden, one stone? Turns out our ancient rabbis were also perplexed by this. Rabbi Yitzchak offered this explanation in the Gemara that there were many rocks at first. Jacob gathered them in a pile, but that they then fused together after the dream, after God reminded Jacob of the Jewish family that he was a part of, and the gigantic Jewish community that would come after him, that even non-Jews would feel blessed to be around. It was after all of that that these many little rocks became one big rock, and then Jacob felt better. I think when, like Jacob, we're worried, when we're scared, when we're anxious, when Jew hatred is at an all-time high, we would do well to be like those rocks. We are strong, standing on our own, but we're alone. We don't have a choice in feeling. We never have a choice in what we feel. We don't have a choice to feel scared or anxious. We certainly have no choice in how other people view us or in how they treat us. The Torah reminds us, though, that being alone is a choice. And that when we are worried or anxious, we would do well to band together when the government is warning us to be even more vigilant against domestic terror threats. The solution is not to turn inward, to isolate, but to reach outward, toward each other, to pool our strength, our resilience, our hope, our joy. And I would push myself a step further, because I am reminded that here we see that God tells Jacob in that vision, both that we as individuals are not allowed to isolate ourselves, that it is an imperative that we seek out other Jews, strengthening and enriching our Jewish community, but that there is also blessing in being in a community with other people. Kol hamishpachot ha'adama, God says in the vision, all the families of the earth. No, the onus is not on us to convince others to see our worth, our humanity. I still find that thought repellent. But Jews make up 2.5% of the American population and 0.2% of the world population. We need to have friends because it's a blessing to have friends, as God points out in the Torah. Friends to love us when we are down, to reassure us when we are worried, and to defend us when we are in need of defending. Just as we must do for our fellow minority groups who find themselves under attack at all times and especially now. For what is Jacob's dream if not proof that we are at our most holy when we come together? Shabbat Shalom.